Happy Wednesday, Penn State fans. This is Blue White Illustrated BWI Live, now brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Good to have them on board with us at Academy Sports and Outdoors. We carry all the gear you need from top brands, all at the prices you'll love, and now shopping at Academy is more convenient than ever because they offer free assembly on in-store purchases of most bikes and grills, plus free and easy curbside pickup on academy.com. So check them out, academy.com. Again, today's show, BWI Live, Wednesday, August 6th. Brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. I'm Greg Pickel from Blue White Illustrated. That's Thomas Frank Carr. And we're going to see how this hour goes today. We've had some technical difficulties to kick things off. We had a late night that we're going to talk about in just a little bit because there was a Big Ten Network special that aired very late on the Nittany Lions. But T. Frank, happy Wednesday and happy 1 week anniversary of Penn State starting fall camp.
Yeah, we are a week in, so we're also going to be previewing camp for tomorrow at some point on the show, kind of giving our thoughts of what we're interested to see or learn from head coach James Franklin. So our next opportunity to talk to him comes up tomorrow night. Great. We're throwing out the things maybe you should do is, Academy Sports and Outdoors. Check them out. Also, subscribe here to the YouTube channel so that you can get those James Franklin post-practice updates because you got a weekend. They were in Beaver Stadium last night, as we saw with some of the highlights on the internet. So there's things to learn. Like we should now have some information about how players are performing and some good feedback from week one, which I'm excited to get.
I'm excited to get that as well, T. Frank. Yeah, so Penn State now, I believe it's 5 practices they are up to. 6 will be Thursday night, I'm assuming, back at Haluba Hall in the Lash building, but time will tell. But I thought that was interesting, and we'll get into it here in just a moment in more detail. But Penn State was in Beaver Stadium last night, and to me, no matter, we'll get into all the things we learned from the Big Ten Network special, which aired at midnight last night. That's why if this is a delusional hour of the BWI Live show presented by Academy Sports and Outdoor, it's because it was 1:32 a.m. kind of an evening, or morning, I guess. But the key to me, T. Frank, is that Beaver Stadium is far enough along that they were able to get in there and practice. We heard James Franklin back in the spring kind of lament the idea that they weren't able to get in the stadium as much. Obviously, back then it was way more of an active construction site than it is now, 24 days before the Nittany Lions host Nevada. But I thought that was a good sign that things are on track and everything is in a place where Penn State could do what it wanted to do, which was practice under the lights before preseason camp's even a week old.
Yeah, and why wouldn't it at this point, right? We're 3 weeks away from the season. I imagine that had to be built in the timeline of we need to get into the stadium before you can't be taking a magnet across the Beaver Stadium turf and being like, did we drop any screws? Like, are there any bolts here on the field? Like, you need to have this thing buttoned up and ready to go. So whatever they might be doing on the west side, it would be wild if it was still interfering with what they had going on the field. So I think for them it's good. For obviously for our optics it's good to see those things and get those highlights. And I'm interested to see how all that's gone because now they had a couple padded practices, and that's all part of the lead up to the first game of getting all these mile markers checked as we get into the prep for Nevada in a couple of weeks.
A lot of insight and intel coming out of Penn State camp over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where it's just $1 for the first week and then build annually from there. Get the latest intel from Sean Fitz, from Nate Bauer, from T. Frank, Ryan Snyder, and I over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Join us today. It's $1 for the first week. That'll get you through the second week of Penn State camp intel, and we hope that you will stay with us from there. Speaking of camp intel, T. Frank, as we said, the Big Ten Network preseason camp tour made its annual stop in State College. They were there Tuesday. Practice was obviously under the lights, which means this show aired at midnight Eastern time instead of, I would say the usual spot is somewhere between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. But because Penn State was going to the stadium, because they were under the lights, and because the interviews always happen after practice, this thing did not air until midnight. It's re-airing, just finished actually. There was a 9 to 10 airing, and all the other times, dates, and everything else you would need to know to find it on your schedule can be found over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But TV, I know you got to watch a little bit of it. I stayed up and watched the whole thing. Big 50,000-foot takeaway is that, as you would imagine, the Big Ten Network crew of Dave Revsine, Gerry DiNardo, and Jake Butt, former Michigan player, are very, very excited about Penn State and what they saw, which is what you would expect considering they're one of the conference's top teams and one of the country's top teams, checking in at number 3 in this week's preseason USA Today coaches poll.
And we all think that, right? So we all think that they're a top team. Coaches across the country think they're a top team, but to be in person and to be going camp to camp to camp and look at this roster, and they mentioned it. They've been to a lot of these camps preseason and seen teams that looked different, looked like championship level rosters that then went on to contend for, and some of them win national championships. And they said Penn State looks like that. So, I mean, it's just another one of those, I think, for Penn State fans that are going to be perpetually skeptical until it actually happens. Like, here's another good sign for you. Jake Butt said on the show, I'm not going to make predictions. I don't have a prediction that they're going to win the championship, but all the ingredients are there, basically, is what they said. So, championship roster, they look like they've got great habits, seniors, basically, Greg, they just said all the things we've been talking about all offseason that we said here on the show. They said it from inside Beaver Stadium, so it gives it a little more weight.
Yeah, M-Rob 456, one of the many people this morning in Nittany Nation asking the top takeaway, or saying rather, the top takeaway is that it was on at midnight. Who thought that was a good idea? So I realized that I am probably, well, I've been told already this morning multiple times and also yesterday. So I'm in the minority of this one. But let me just set it up for you. And you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to understand it, but it is the reality of the situation. BTN's committed to airing these things on the day that they are taped at practice. And so Penn State practice under the lights. Penn State does not do interviews until after practice. I don't think they could have got this thing to air any sooner than midnight. And they have another camp special with Rutgers tonight at 8 p.m. So the BTN team that was in State College left last night to go to Piscataway. So I think it's just a best, or the non-ideal situation. Right.
Everybody is on Penn State football schedule. We get the stuff when we get it. They get it when they get it. So Penn State doesn't deviate from their schedule. They weren't like, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to practice Tuesday night, not under the lights, not in as prime time of a scenario as we can make it in Beaver Stadium. But we're going to do it at 4 o'clock so that the poor producers of the BTN Camp Show can get it turned around by 8 o'clock, and then they can go, to bed. They aren't going to deviate from their schedule. So Penn State or BTN, I'm impressed they got it out by midnight. Honestly,
I am too.
That's impressive that if they were if they got done with practice at whatever it was, like 8:30, they do those interviews, they put it all together, they stitch it. Like, it takes a lot of time. This morning, I didn't have internet for 45 minutes from 9 o'clock until 9:55, roughly. We're not having the bells and whistles on the show today because I just couldn't get it done. I can't imagine having to put all that stuff together in a time crunch in like that quick of a time roll around and getting it ready for midnight. I think it's a little ridiculous that they have to do it the same day. Like, why not do it at 8 a.m., which of course, like, they did air it at 9. Not that I got a chance to see the whole thing, because as soon as I hit play on my YouTube TV, my entire
internet.
I thought I was my fault. Like, it always starts with like, what button did I press to make all these things happen? But yeah, like, they did air it at 9, so they at least had the second runaround. But yeah, Penn State doesn't deviate from their schedule very much for pretty much anybody.
Right. So I think that I totally get where Penn State fans are coming from and saying, why would they do it at midnight? But I think it was just the circumstances, both how the Big Ten Network's process is and obviously how Penn State's process is, and that's what we were left with. So the good news is for Penn State fans, there are multiple opportunities to see this show both later today and tomorrow. If you didn't have a recording set for any of the broadcasts that already happened, I think it was midnight, 2, 4, and then 9 a.m. Eastern time today. Ryan said he tried to stay up. Buddy, I tried to go to bed and I couldn't go to bed. So I'm in the opposite boat as you. That's why it's going to be a delirious 45 minutes or so here.
Yeah, and then you decided to get up at like 5.
Yeah.
It's not like you then were like, you know what, I'm sleeping in this morning.
Yeah, it's going to be a long day, T. Frank, but that's okay. We're going to get through it together. A couple other things I thought were interesting. Jim Knowles sat down with the BTN staff, and they hammered it to anyone they could ask. This idea, it's obviously true. Jim Knowles, now the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football, and he comes to Penn State with the unique background of having coached against Penn State for multiple years at Ohio State. They hammered that point home. But one thing that was interesting in that line of talk that I don't think really gets enough credit or discussion. Obviously, Jim Knowles could sit down. James Franklin's talked about it. Sit down and give his assessment of Penn State and every player on the roster from when he scouted Penn State and played against Penn State. But Drew Aller made a note that he watched a game with the analysts that Jim Knowles brought with him from Ohio State. And I thought that was really telling too, because those guys, even more so than Jim Knowles, and the rest of the Penn State's analyst staff spend their existence breaking down either Penn State tape, transfer portal tape, future opponent tape, so on and so forth. And so not that Jim Knowles didn't have his own unique perspective. Of course he did. But I thought that was interesting, too, that Drew Aller was not only willing to watch it with Jim Knowles and get his perspective, then also do it again. It could have been fun to watch once, let alone twice or three times. But Drew Aller took that commitment this offseason to find any little way he can get better. And what better way to do it than getting perspectives from outside the building?
Yeah, that's something that Andy Kolnicki talked about during Media Day about Drew Aller being fanatical about getting better, about self-improvement. And, I've sat here for 3 years now and talked about the underlying talent and how Penn State fans are like, yeah, but we don't see it. We don't see these things that come up, especially in these big games that we're talking about. And that's why it's hard to bet against Aller. It's really hard to say, like, Drew Aller isn't it. Because I know this about him, and I see in the good moments how it all applies, and then, you are left with that frustration of the disconnect between the two. Like, if you're studying Aller as a player and his production and his performance, like, there is just this final gap for him to do it all the time. Right. And here's another piece of the puzzle of maybe that helps. Maybe this is the other thing that helps him understand in the moment, whatever rep, whatever film study, whatever it is that finally helps him turn the corner. If he's going to do it, it's going to be this year, and maybe this is one of those things that helps unlock it. But it is it does speak to the larger picture about Drew Aller and why so many people around him believe in him, given how he's performed. And the perception, I guess, the difference between the two.
Yeah, Schwartzy in the chat mentions something that came up on the show. Tony Rojas saying he ran a 4.37, or I think tonight Dennis Sutton may have said it for him. I can't remember. But regardless, that came up. Jim Knowles, also obviously a very big fan of Tony Rojas. And look, I know you spent some time with him at Penn State Media Day, T. Frank. I did as well. I was impressed by his... so one of the things I asked him, we've talked about this on the show, and I almost took it right. I almost played him a clip from the show, but didn't have the time for that. But we talked about this issue where he had a long-term injury pretty much the entire 2024 season, and he was able to play through, and it obviously had an impact on his play. And so I tried to give him an out because I thought he deserved it in terms of how much his tackling did he feel was impacted, or, a lack thereof in some instances, by the injury. He wouldn't take it. He would not take the out. Yeah. He was like, look, I spent all offseason working on tackling, whether it was with blocking bags, whether it was with, players, obviously, during the spring. And he really took to heart. I don't want to say he took the criticism to heart, but he took to heart the fact that he needs to improve his tackling. And again, I think that there's a good chunk of that was not totally his fault or not something that he really had a ton of control over. But, if you think about Tony Rojas this year and you worry about his tackling, if it's an issue again this year, T. Frank, it's not going to be for a lack of effort trying to fix it in the offseason.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about him a little bit more when we talk about the freaks list and some of those things. By the way, I was going to have all the freaks list. Now I'm just doing the thing of being like petty and bitchy, but I was going to have all the freaks list of all their times and measurements and measurables and all of it for you here on screen, and those aren't coming up today. But we are going to talk about these things. I talked to Anthony Donko. I talked to Alonzo Ford, Jackson Smolik, all these guys who were injured last year, and their seasons ended. To a man, all of them, and I said this yesterday on the show, all of them refused to acknowledge that injuries play a part in their performance.
Right.
Anthony Donko was in mid-sentence and said compensate. He said the word compensate, and then he changed, he edited himself out loud and said, well, maybe not compensate, but, and then he had to find a way to say, like, it wasn't an issue because I was out there on the field, and if I'm out there on the field, I have to perform. You don't have as high of a standard as Tony Rojas has for himself. You don't have as high of a standard of performance as Anthony Donko has for himself if you're a fan watching. They also think this way, but we can't be insane. We have to understand that if your shoulder doesn't work, you can't put it over your head without pain, you can't tackle the same way. And so he's not going to say it. And I guess, Greg, it's left to us to be the ones to say it, of like, yeah, sure. It's harder to tackle and to take on blocks. And that was the thing I think it was the biggest problem, was taking on blocks and being able to use proper technique to be in the hole regularly, which is really important for a linebacker. all those things should lead to better performance this year. But again, like if he focused on it all this offseason, and maybe it was something that was a part of his game that we didn't learn because he was injured for his full first season starting. Maybe it's even better this year, right? We don't know. Maybe it's the same. Maybe it's better. We're going to find out together. But I still maintain at this point, nobody knows if Tony Rojas is actually good at tackling because he couldn't do it right last year.
Right. And all right, let's slip over to the other side of the ball. Obviously, Andy Kotelnicki, Drew Aller, and James Franklin all talked about the Penn State offense in 2025. And where else would we take this conversation, T. Frank, but the receivers room? A lot of positive commentary, both from the Big Ten Network crew and from Andy Kotelnicki about the newcomers at receiver, Kyron Hudson, Trey Borpena, and Devontae Ross. Also, shout out for Liam Clifford from Andy Kotelnicki, and he wouldn't name all the names, but he thought the young guys in that receivers room were performing well too. The question you just have to ask yourself, T. Frank, a week in the camp is it either too early to make any cement or concrete, rather, just declarations about that room? Is it all lip service? Or is this group really starting to take the steps that Penn State fans need them to take or want them to take and that Penn State needs them to take to be better this year? And I'm not sure I'm ready to dive into the deep end yet, but certainly can't, go completely off the reservation in terms of not even acknowledging the positive things coming out about this group a week in the camp.
So I'll say this from this perspective of one of the things Dave Revsine put out a tweet yesterday talking about the receivers. And again, I put it up in your morning coffee thread, all of the different tweets from him and Jake Butt yesterday. So for Blue White Illustrated fans and subscribers, you can go to that and see them all in the same spot. We can't all be saying the same thing and it not have some merit. So I don't know whether or not who they talked to or when maybe they got an opinion given to them or kind of a lay of the land, right? So you talk to people and, you get information and that influences your opinions and decisions. I can tell you, I haven't talked to anybody, and I came to the same exact conclusion as Dave Revsine, that this is a unit that maybe there's not one that's going to blow you away, but the group of them should be better and should have this professional approach. I haven't talked to Dave, so it's not like we're sharing these thoughts, and if everyone's coming to the same conclusion, like where there's smoke, there's got to be fire. Or at least there's got to be some sort of fire. So if you're still skeptical about the receivers, even in the analysis is baked in the skepticism of there's no number one here. There's nobody that's going to blow you away. But in the aggregate, the group of them should be better. They look more consistent. I think Jake was like, this is definitely an improved unit from last year. So from a football sense, how you play the position, the crispness of routes, things like that, there is this growing consensus. This group should be better. And should be is we're all saying should be. Like we all are saying this is not a definite guarantee. So, I think from that perspective, from the receiver conversation, again, all the evidence is pointing in one direction, but no one's pointing directly in the direction of this is a star group of receivers.
All right, T. Frank, I'm going to make you feel better about your technology issues this morning. I'm going to use one of your pre-made graphics to ensure this is not a graphic-less show. All right. If you're listening to us on the podcast or just an audio feed, that is the question of the day sound, and it comes from Schwartzy. What are Penn State fans more skeptical of, the preseason ranking or the wide receiver room? And it's a great question.
Oh, not even close, Greg. Yeah, I know. Which way are you going?
Well, so I've talked to a lot of Penn State fans, and I don't think I'm with you. I think I'm about to find out here live on air, but I think it's the receivers room for sure.
Yeah.
Most Penn fans truly don't care about the preseason rankings. I know there's some that in past years they have been ranked a certain way, and that has not always led to the best outcome for the season. I don't think it has anything to do with it, quite frankly. So it's the receivers room. There's no doubt. And I think more than anything, the one thing I keep hearing from fans, and I don't disagree with it, is I don't know if any of them, T. Frank, are going to be totally sold on this group until what they do against Oregon. Yeah, I don't care if they catch 5 touchdowns a game in the non-conference portion of the schedule. I mean, it'd be nice. It would make people feel better about what to expect going into that Oregon game. But I just feel like the fan base at this point needs to see it in action. It needs to see it against one of the better or perhaps best teams on the schedule. So
there's no middle ground, though. That's the wild thing is there's no middle ground because it's Nevada, FIU, Villanova, break. Your hardest game of the year. You know what I mean? Like Ohio State, one of your hardest games of the year. So it's not like there's any sort of, they dominated against Nebraska or whoever on the list of teams next year. It's night and day, hot and cold, the biggest challenge they're going to have until that game in Columbus. And so, like, even then, is that a fair... I guess it is a fair litmus test given where they want to go. So sure, like, I guess we'll just ramp it up to hard mode immediately. But it's just wild how you could go through this first month of the season and still not have kind of the median of what this receiver group is. And yeah, to me, no question, it's the receivers, because I've had more conversations about these two topics than anything else. Wide receivers, number one, and then that schedule the first 3 weeks. Why aren't they playing anyone hard? Why aren't they playing a warm-up game? And, like, that's the number one thing. I've had people who are, like, trying to ninja in reasons why it's a bad thing. The answer is you're bored. You're bored by it. Like, you don't want to watch Nevada or FIU because it's not going to be as exciting. And I said this the other day. I went on our friends over on a local radio station at Seven Mountains Media, and I said, what do you want as a Penn State fan? A little bit of excitement in September? Or do you want them to be set up for a national championship run? I think this first month of the season gives them every possible opportunity to beat Oregon because they get an extra month of camp. So, I know I've gone on a total tangent. I just realized, I just woke up in the middle of that sentence being like, oh, this was a total tangent. Yeah, it's the receiver room and the non-conference schedule. I don't think they need to play anybody. Like, I just don't think they need to play anybody because they play somebody immediately on the schedule at the end of September.
I think Penn State fans want both, T. Frank. That's my read on the situation. Yeah. Good news is, with Academy Sports and Outdoors, you can get both free assembly and free and easy curbside pickup. Did you like that transition? That was the way we're going to do it. This is the BWI Live Show, Wednesday, August 6th. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel. It's brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. At Academy Sports and Outdoors, we carry all the gear you need from the top brands, all at the prices you'll love. And now shopping at Academy is more convenient than ever. Why? I just mentioned it. We offer free assembly on in-store purchases of most bikes and grills, plus free and easy curbside pickup on academy.com orders. If you want to save even more every day, you can open and use an Academy Sports and Outdoors credit card to get 5% off future purchases when you're approved. Save time and money at Academy Sports and Outdoors and have fun out there. So big takeaways here. Academy Sports and Outdoors, we appreciate them being with us. Mm-hmm. Free assembly on some in-store purchases, T. Frank, free and easy curbside pickup, and you can check out their credit card offer as well. Academy Sports, I'm sorry, I lost my spot here. Academy.com is where you can check out things. Obviously, there's stores around the Pennsylvania area. There's one here in the Harrisburg area. Pretty neat spot. I've checked that out a couple of times. So check them out. We appreciate them for sponsoring the show and being with us here on this episode of BWI Live. All right, we wrapped up the BTN.
Hold on. We're not done yet. We're not done
sir.
yet because this is a very successful show. We've got more sponsors, including Tixman Jim, who's been here for a long time. If you've been looking for a reliable source of Penn State football tickets, Jim at TixmanJim.com, formerly PSUTixman.com, has been running his ticket exchange in Wilmington, Delaware for over 25 years. Every buyer is handled with courtesy, respect, and every ticket purchased is guaranteed. Proceeds are used to fund the PSU AA Chapter Scholarship Fund and the PSU Levi Lamb Fund for athletic scholarship. So go to the Nevada game. Watch them, and more importantly, then watch Sunday and Monday as I break down all the film to tell you what's actually important in that game, as opposed to watching the game where they just clobber somebody probably by 60 points. I'll give you the interesting details about that and how young players played, all that kind of stuff after the game. But of course, go to the game so you get the understanding of, you were there. You saw it with your own eyes. Your 2025 season tickets are on sale now. Go to TixmanJim.com or email Jim at TixmanJim.com. At gmail.com.
Have you heard of Wave Fruit Farm? It's this great farm market bakery and cafe. You can shop with them either at their farm in Port Matilda or downtown State College.
No way.
Yes, Wave Fruit Farm. They have all sorts of seasonal fruits and veggies.
Way cool.
No, Wave Fruit Farm. But anyway, you should visit their bakery and cafe. They serve amazing food all day.
Way.
Fruit Farm.
So Schwartzy says, I don't think you understand the strength of the Villanova Wildcats. I don't. I haven't looked at them yet. I have not been paying attention to them. I'm trying my hardest to grind through Nevada right now to understand their offensive and defensive principles.
Good luck, buddy. They have a lot of new on that team on both sides.
This is why I'm not going that's why I'm not going into who's good, who's not good. I was actually watching them. The reason I did it at all was, hey, Oregon's left tackle, Isaiah Worlds, played for Nevada last year. So I'm going to get a double dip of what do they like to do? And I've been going almost completely off of what are the X's and O's, because the players are completely changed. And even then, their quarterback last year was like a running back. They ran him 100 and some times. I don't know that Chuba Purdy's going to be doing that this year. So we'll see we're all going to find out what Nevada does in week 1. But yeah, I am absolutely underselling Villanova.
Nevada's defensive coordinator, I read a quote from him the other day, and the head coach has said that this kind of the same thing this offseason too, where they're basically like, I'm paraphrasing and putting their words into my paraphrase, but they're basically like, thank God we have all these new guys. Like, they've been very blunt about the fact that they think this roster is more talented than the one last year, which, hey, maybe it is. We'll have to wait and see. They come to Beaver Stadium only 24 days from August 6th, which is, of course, today. So we will get more into the Wolfpack in the future. But now, Frank, let's move on to. Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
I know, this is what happens when we don't have any pre-show conversation, and then we go basically cold in. Right. I did want to talk about one more thing that they talked about on the BTN tour, which is kind of like what we set up here on the show. If we don't talk about what's on the thumbnail, I kind of feel like a jerk. That's really what's going on. Jim Knowles, like the fact we talked about the receivers and kind of where there's smoke, there's fire, about everyone's kind of saying the same thing. Same thing about Jim Knowles' defense, something that I think it was Butt said during the kind of wrap-up portion of the show was couldn't believe how much they had in on defense, how complex the defense was at this stage in camp. And I know that some fans are going to be nervous about that, and sure, there is a little bit of like, is everyone going to be on the same page? But my biggest assessment last year was at times they were a little too predictable, and in that Notre Dame game, they gave the quarterback too much of what to expect, and he was able to find the receiver because they were playing man coverage half the time. Penn State will not be playing man coverage half the time this year. Will they be more aggressive with it this year, maybe than Ohio State was, given how Jim Knowles has been raving about the corners? Yeah, that's a good bet. But they're going to be playing a bunch of really complex coverages. They're going to show you one thing, give you another, make it hard pre-snap to understand what they're doing, and then dialing up the pressure on the quarterback from that mental side of things. I think that's going to be a defining feature of this team this year. And that's where in the margins of, maybe the talent didn't change all that much, or maybe even you lose an Abdul Carter. That's where I think they have the most opportunity for growth, is just making it hard on the quarterback and shutting down some of those games where we saw Bowling Green, to Schwartz's point, we saw Bowling Green read this defense well, and when they got a beat on man-to-man coverage, cover 0 or cover 1, they could find the open receiver. I don't think you're going to get that this year from Jim Knowles in any game. They had issues last year where they'd start slow and they wouldn't have a great plan. None of that should be what happens this year, even if they do have some defensive communication issues, which, by the way, they had last year too when they were playing a simpler scheme. So all of that can improve with Jim Knowles, and I think that is a difference maker. And they talked about it. We've talked about it here on the show. It keeps coming up that Jim Knowles and his schematic abilities, the evil genius sort of game plan that we saw with Manny Diaz, that spirit is back in the defense this year.
It most certainly is. And yeah, Penn State will go into games and they will get beat. They will give up plays. They will give up points. But I didn't need the Big Ten Network show to tell me that this team will go into each game prepared on defense, and Jim Knowles will put them in the right position on defense in most plays, not every play, most plays. And so if you worry about those communication issues, yeah, they're going to happen. Are they going to happen the way they did last year? I'd be shocked. But there are some new pieces in place. There will be some wrinkles to iron out early in the year, but everyone loves Jim Knowles, man. Everyone I talk to, and this, I guess, is a good transition into our media day recap conversation. I'm sure you and Nate got into this a bit yesterday as well. But everyone I talked to at Penn State Media Day, whether it was a coach, whether it was a player, whether it was an assistant, whoever it might have been, just raves about Jim Knowles and the way he does business. And again, there's one part of you that says, well, what else would they say? But they can say these things and not be as enthusiastic and emphatic about it, T. Frank. And that is what jumps out to me, is that people in this Penn State program just love Jim Knowles and love the way he goes about things. And more importantly, trust the way he goes about things.
Yeah, that trust part is the second thing, because here's the difference. So I don't want to be revisionist, and I want to own, I was excited for Tom Allen last year.
Yeah, I do think Tom Allen's catching a little bit more shade than he probably should. I do get that sense. Yeah.
It wasn't a bad defense. It had its issues. I also was under
It also
the impression
lost its best players 4 quarters into the season, and no one
Yeah.
wants to give Tom Allen a lot of credit for coming up with a plan to overcome that and bringing Wheatley along in a way that I think he's one of the more under-discussed, underrated players in the country. A guy who started 16 games was fantastic, and the only reason he did that is because Tom Allen and Anthony Poindexter brought him along and put him in position to take over the safety room. So sorry, I'll let you go. But I just think that Tom Allen, in this Jim Knowles conversation, it's somewhat in some parts of the internet turned into belittling Tom Allen and his job last year. And was he perfect? No. But I just think that's worth pointing out.
But it's the either or thing, right? Like we always do the binary comparison. Yep. But I guess, so to that point, I just want to echo something you said. Zakee Wheatley wasn't necessarily the best tackler or the best in the box, and they helped him develop into that as a guy who that, he's gotten better. And 6'2", 190-some pounds, like there's no reason he can't be good against the run. Something he developed, the mentality, the understanding, all those things got better over the year to be in the position to be he is now. And Tom Allen was certainly somewhat part of that. But the part that I think that I saw from Tom Allen was I like defenses that force the quarterback into unexpected situations where there's a coverage rotation you're not expecting. And Tom Allen did that at Indiana. Now, some of the conversation was he had to do that because if he played straight up against better teams, his athletes would not have as much success. But there was a history of defensive backs at Indiana going to the NFL or making plays in college football. And we saw some of that last year, but I don't know if the translation from I have all this talent at Penn State now, what do I do with it? He didn't bring as much of that same spirit of kind of a Mad Hatter sort of a way of going about it. And I think that's kind of the difference between Jim Knowles and what Tom Allen was doing is Jim Knowles is doing these things intentionally. They are part of the structure and the fabric of what he wants to do on defense and not necessarily the things he had to do on defense. And maybe there's some of the innovation coming from desperation at places like Duke and Oklahoma State, but it became a defense that Ohio State wanted and won a championship with. So like there is that proof of iteration and development over time that there is a difference there. And some of my mistakes as an analyst is like not seeing what is translatable or what is done intentionally versus what is done kind of out of desperation, I guess you'd say. And that's kind of the difference with Indiana Tom Allen and Penn State Tom Allen is a lot of that stuff that I expected to see from him might go to the KJ Winston thing of they couldn't do it because they didn't have the players out there they trusted, and so they simplified the playbook. But we'll never know because all those things that happened. The end result is now we have this criticism, as you mentioned, of the comparison between the two. But they are similar in the way that they tried to approach the game previously.
Yeah. Well, most importantly, T. Frank, I am very interested to see what Jim Knowles' defense looks like and how it evolves over the first month of the season. I don't think he said at Media Day that Penn State, even without all the guys that weren't available on the defense during spring ball, he doesn't feel like his installation is behind. I have a slightly hard time believing that in totality. Maybe not in, I'm sure it's plenty far along, and he's done this before.
Some of the veterans are the guys that weren't out there, right? So I think that's part of the, he mentioned that guys, you never know when they're not out there. Are they absorbing all the information? If they can't go through it physically, are they actually going to be adapting and understanding? And so far, I guess, from what I heard of Media Day, what he had to say to us, yes, Tony Rojas was picking it up, Zane Durant was picking it up all on the sidelines, and so things have gone smoothly so far. But you're right, like there is that unknown, I think, from his side of, I know what I have in Tony Rojas theoretically, but how do I then create something new once I see him on the field? What's the creative? What's the thing from point A, from point B right now that I can make once I understand his talents? And I think that's where we might see something, over the next month or so.
Yeah. Ryan notes in the chat that James Franklin said on the Big Ten Network show that the offense installation is ahead of the defense installation. It should be. I mean, I think the way he put it, it gave me the shakes because I hate math, but I think he put it as Andy Kotelnicki's trying to teach trigonometry and Jim Knowles is still on geometry. And I think that's fair. Again, Andy Kotelnicki's in year 2 of his system at Penn State with a veteran quarterback and a veteran offense. One of the things Andy Kotelnicki said both at the team's recent availability and also on BTN is that when you have a fourth-year quarterback who's in the second year of your system, there's some freedom you give him. And the example he gave on the BTN show was with checks at the line of scrimmage with a receiver that you're not giving a first-year starter or maybe even a second-year starter. So the offense installation it'd be more problematic if the offense was not ahead of the defense at this point from an install standpoint.
Yeah, full red flag if the offense was still struggling with the basics of where to line up and how to execute. And I think that's also been kind of a conversation about everyone's wondering Andy Kolicki and then, what happened with Mike Yurcich back in 2023. And it's that he had a first-time starter, so he treated him like a first-time starter. Now Andy Kolicki has a senior, so he's treating him like a senior. And that's just I can't even understate the vast ocean of difference between one and the other when it comes to understanding the quarterback position, where you have to know everything. You have to know offense, you have to know defense, you have to anticipate, you have to understand what they're trying to do to attack you and where your answers are at all times. Oh, and by the way, people are throwing wrenches at you. It's like dodgeball, the movie where you dodge a wrench, you can dodge ball. You've got to do it all under stress. And so the accumulation of knowledge over time is so important to the quarterback position, which leads us all the way back to our question of the day. That's why they're ranked third. That's one of the reasons they're ranked third.
Right. Yeah, Z-Man says the Big Ten crew felt both the offense and defense looked game ready during practice. Well, they should, considering how many guys are back and going through a preseason camp for not the first time, not the second time, but the fifth, sixth time. Obviously, 4, 5, 6. Your guys in this program make up a bulk of the core, so they should look game ready. Also, I wouldn't really expect the BTN guys to say anything else. But at any rate, anything you learned at Media Day that you didn't get to cover on Tuesday's show, T. Frank, I will share my first thought on that, but I want to kick it off with you. What'd you learn that we didn't get to yesterday?
So I didn't get a chance to write about this yet, and I'm going to be writing about it. But basically, Anthony Donko's injuries early in the year kind of turned the light on for Nolan Rucci, according to what Phil Trautwein said about Rucci, is that he realized he was the next man up when he had to be the next man up early in the year, and that turn the corner for him to then eventually play well late in the year and generate the situation that you have now. So silver linings, blessings in disguise, whatever you want to say, these things are linked in terms of the rise of Nolan Rucci and how early in the year, maybe when he struggled, he wasn't mentally locked in the same way that he was late in the year. And I do think that, this is the part where I'm connecting the dots. Donko going down a couple times definitely made it concretely obvious that he had to be ready to go into the game, and that became a kind of a driving force of where we are now with the conversation about the offensive line and who's going to play where.
Yeah, and so that offensive line conversation is really interesting because the more you watch, the more you listen, the more you find things out during this preseason camp process. I genuinely don't know how they're going to pick the first. I know how they're going to pick it. They're going to sit in a room and discuss it and figure it out. But I mean, in terms of how hard that conversation and those decisions are going to be, they're going to be difficult because this Penn State offensive line, I think Drew Aller said on the BTN show that he thinks Penn State has legitimately 10 guys who could start. I'm not sure about that, but I think it's at least 6 to 8. And so
trying to think of it. Yeah.
And so there's obviously more guys who are capable of starting than Penn State will have starting spots along its offensive line. And it's a veteran group of guys who, in some cases, have played a ton of football. In some cases, have been a first or second year starter. In a case of a guy like Cooper Cousins, is obviously chomping at the bit after playing his first season in different roles a year ago to try and be a starter this year. So certainly fascinating to see how it plays out with the right tackle battle and how the outcome of that impacts the situation at guard, because Anthony Donko was clear today that he is working at guard and at tackle. And I think, whether or not once that battle is determined between him and Rucci, how does that impact the rest of the line? It's going to be pretty interesting to follow and figure out.
I just think it's crazy that Javen Williams, a former 5-star who got praised this offseason and looked good in the blue-white game. By the way, not just faint praise from James Franklin of trying to manifest positivity and kind of give his guy a boost. Legitimately played well when we got a chance to watch him. And he's not the swing tackle for this group right now. I made this conversation and wrote about this week of if we want to get down to the brass tacks of it, this year's swing tackle is Anthony Donko. Now, maybe he wins the right tackle job and it becomes something different. But right now, the reason we're talking about Anthony Donko is because he's playing two positions. He's playing inside, outside. and he might be the most talented offensive lineman on this roster. I find that to be amazing. That is a testament to the talent and the depth of this group. But even below that, the guy that I thought would be that coming into the season would be Javen Williams, and we're not even talking about that. Now, where he is, I think 4 or 5 years ago, he's a starter. And now, like, is he the 7th guy? It's just wildly impressive.
Yes, it really is. And it just speaks to the depth of that room. I think you wrote about it, or it might have been Nate Bauer over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, but just Phil Troutwine saying basically that, like, no, he was very honest when somebody asked him, it might have been you, if he's had this depth in this quote unquote problem before. And he was like, no, never, not at Penn State, not anywhere else. And it just speaks to what he and this coaching staff have done, both from a recruiting perspective and then also from a development perspective, to put themselves in this position. Going to the chat quick, Diana finally caught you guys live. Thank you. We appreciate you and everyone else joining us here today on this BWI Live, Wednesday, August 6th. I'm Greg Pickel. That's Thomas Frank Carr. Show's brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors and our awesome other sponsors. So we'll recap all that at the end of the show. But yeah, the offensive line is impressive. Obviously, it's a very deep group. And I think the most important part here, T. Frank, is that it doesn't have to be just this year that position group is a strength of this team. Yes, Nick Dawkins is out of eligibility after this year. Yes, Vangiawani is almost certainly going to the NFL after this year, and probably ditto for Drew Shelton. Doesn't mean this offensive line has to take a big step back. And then we'll get through this season before worrying about next year. But I just think, again, the point here is just the depth, and that I don't know how good anyone really felt when Anthony Donko got hurt last year, that Nolan Rucci was going to end up playing as well as he did. This year, if someone goes down, it's not just one guy that would be capable of filling in at the same level as a starter. It would be a couple. And that's a pretty good place to be entering a season.
Yeah. Egan Boyer, Owen Alasini, Javen Williams, Malachi Goodman. 4 offensive tackles that have impressed so far, and we've gotten good feedback from, or we just are giant people, like the fact that Malachi Goodman looks the way he does as a true freshman. Those are 4 guys that likely aren't going to be major contributors in the starting 5, or, but they're there for the next year. To your point, Greg, if Penn State, let's just say everything goes great for Penn State, they win a national championship, everyone performs really well, and Donko goes early, they've got 4 guys to then replace those 3 tackles. That's crazy. Like, that's an insane amount of depth. And we'll see, transfer portal, all those things, but Penn State's developed such a good offensive line, cohesive culture that you feel encouraged about everything staying in place. Like, it's just really good. It's just really good. I'm excited when I see something I've never seen before, and from where they started to where they are now, this is very fun to talk about. It's fun to talk about positive options rather than, how do we figure this out, and how do you move the pieces around so that you don't have any holes in the ship.
We got big news, T. Frank. We got a super chat.
Hey,
got a super chat. Brett, thank you for the donation here to help you guys get the best Penn State information possible at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and here on the BWI Live Show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Brett says he finally called a live show. Football is so close to back. You're right, 24 days. Great time to take advantage of our $1 for the first week offer over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for the latest camp intel. And Brett asked, do you think Elliott Washington not winning the cornerback 2 job yet is all Davian Collins and Zion Tracy stepping up, or Elliott not fully taking control of the position? A couple thoughts here, and I'll let you riff on this for a second, T. Frank. First, I mean, who says he hasn't, I guess, is my first thought. Like, that's not really even a consideration I had. I mean, to me, he's the number 2 guy in my mind until somebody supplants him otherwise. There is no depth chart, and James Franklin, nor Terry Smith, nor Jim Knowles is going to go out of their way, to name anyone a starter at this point. That's not how they've operated for 12 years now, and they are certainly not going to change ahead of this season. So I do think I heard some good things to your point, though, Brett. I heard some good things about Collins at Penn State Media Day last weekend. I think Zion Tracy obviously profiles as that nickel guy. So I think between Elliott Washington and Aldavian Collins, Penn State has a 1A, 1B. I would expect Washington, obviously, to be the one who starts T. Frank opposite A.J. Harris, but that doesn't mean you're not going to see a lot of Collins this year. So I think at this point, that secondary is maybe an under. Is it possible for it to be an under talked about position group because of how much we want to focus on the offensive line and the questions at defensive line and the running backs and the receivers? It's a darn good secondary, T. Frank. It's been for a number of years under Anthony Poindexter and Terry Smith. This year is going to be no different.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil too many of the things that Nate has coming over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I don't remember what he said about this yesterday, but Jim Knowles is very high on the corners. I'll just say that. So there's not a problem with the group. If you're saying, is Elliott Washington not living up to anything? Like, that's not the situation. The way I've seen it is, and I'm just going off of templates of what we've seen before, they've called A.J. Harris an All-American Big Ten and All Big Ten corner. To me, that means he's the guy. Like, he's the number one corner. And the depth beyond that, we've seen Johnny Dixon and Kalen King every other game be the starter. Every single week in a competition for who's going to start, but they're both going to play. I viewed that more as a competition of 2A and 2B. They're both going to be co-starters at the position. And yes, they're going to do a three-man weave, and A.J. Harris is going to come off the field sometimes. But it's primarily, from a snaps perspective, going to be A.J. Harris, and then Washington and Collins battling all season long and raising the elevation of play, theoretically, between the two of them. I think they're both going to play a lot, and they're both super talented. I don't know if people are talking enough about Davian Collins, his speed, his man coverage ability, and the way he's taken to Jim Knowles' system of being hyper-aggressive within the rules with his hands and his aggression. He's not the biggest of these three, but he's got attitude, and I think that's a major thing for this particular group. So, yeah, I think it's a very positive situation for Penn State to have those three guys, plus Tracy. And, by the way, he mentioned Darius Dixon as another guy that played really well in the spring and they're excited about. So 4-5 deep at corner. And, by the way, I just want to say welcome back, Brett. He is a regular on the postgame show. Don't forget about the postgame show coming up this year. We're going to have a ton of fun with Brett and everybody else who shows up immediately following every Penn State football game to talk about what just happened.
Brett, thank you, buddy, for the Super Chat donation. Thanks for catching a live show out of season. And as T. Frank said, don't forget that once the season starts, his post-game show will be back here on the BWI YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to that, T. Frank. Always a good time. And I think Brett had a follow-up here, which I'm happy to. Let's get his answer there. Was inferring more for Media Day where they went out of their way to talk about Collins and Tracy. Yeah, I've got to be honest. I don't really remember it playing out exactly that way. There certainly was praise for Collins and Tracy, but I feel like they were asked specifically about those two. I didn't think it was so much going out of their way as much as it was they were asked a question and directly answered it, which doesn't always happen. Right. Yeah, but I'm almost certain that's how it played out. So Elliott Washington certainly was talked about a lot in the spring, and I think everyone knows exactly what is expected from him this fall. But yeah, I think, Brett, that if I remember correctly, and if not, I'll post something over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com later today in the Lions Den message board. But I'm pretty sure that he was they were asked directly, Franklin, and I think even Jim Knowles, about Collins and Tracy. So I think that's why those two were focused on. All right, it's 48 minutes in, T. Frank, and we didn't get to one of our headline topics of the day on this edition of BWI Live, brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoor. It's Bruce Feldman's annual Freaks List. So if you're not familiar with it, started 20 years ago. I can't remember where Bruce Feldman was working at that point in time, but he's now with The Athletic, and he's been posting this compilation of reporting he's done across the sport for 20 years. This is the 20th year of players who we quote unquote are freaks. And obviously that's from the most physical, the strongest, fastest guys in college football. And 5 Penn State players made the list: Zane Durant, Nick Singleton, Tony Rojas, Elliott Washington. So there you go, Brett. Shout out for him there on Bruce Feldman's freak list, and also Khalil Dinkins. But all 5 of those guys inside the top 100. With Zane Durant being inside the top 10. So, T. Frank, I don't think there's any shock of who is on this list for Penn State. And obviously some people think that I'm sure that other guys could be on this list. And, you know, he keeps it to 100. I'm sure it's impossible to keep it to 100. But the 5 guys that are on here are, I guess, almost, maybe not 100%, the 5 I would expect, but pretty darn close to that.
Yeah, so there are better players probably on the Penn State roster in certain situations. A.J. Harris maybe isn't a freak athlete, but might be one of the better players at his position in his talent perspective. But like you mentioned, this is about physical ability, testing numbers, height, weight, speed. Who's the EST? Who's got EST syndrome? Who's the biggest, fastest, strongest? But I think there is that other half of it of, you know, we've seen guys who are absolute freaks from an athletic perspective at Penn State, but don't necessarily then generate elite production on the field. So I thought it'd be interesting to then take some of these numbers the talent and how how those numbers translate to the talent,
right,
and where are the areas where these guys can then convert that ability into better production for 2025. And that's kind of, I wrote about that at bluewhiteillustrated.com. I think it's an interesting perspective to look at it's fun to just look at the numbers and all those things, but what do they mean? And how do they then translate to football? And where are the areas where these guys can then take a next step? So that's kind of what I wanted to cover here to end the show. I think it's maybe a helpful preseason preview on top of the cherry on top of the cake of just getting to gobble up that Penn State had the most guys on the freaks list of any team in the country.
Yeah, and again, I think if this list went to 150, there probably would have been a couple more guys added to that list, and perhaps Bruce Feldman's 21st freaks list will go beyond 100. But again, I'm sure he has a hard enough time cutting it at 100 as it is. Somebody mentioned in the chat, it's a good point to make. Jordan Vandenberg, former Penn State player, on the list. Obviously, he's now down at Georgia Tech. I was thinking about it last night, T. Frank. I have to get my list together of all the former Penn State guys playing elsewhere. I need to do that this week and get a check-in going on how those guys are doing in camp. So I'll work on that this week, but Jordan Vandenberg, certainly one of the former Lions playing elsewhere this fall, made Bruce Feldman's freaks list. You can check that out over at The Athletic. But yeah, any final thoughts on that, T. Frank? I thought you had a nice breakdown yesterday of what the guys over at Blue White Illustrated can do with these numbers, what it means, how it can help them maximize things. I know you just mentioned that a second ago, but just in general, I think the biggest thing to me means football season's close. I think someone in the chat said they miss Penn State football like the desert misses rain. That's about right. And Bruce Feldman's annual freaks list is I hope I'm getting this saying right, but like the oasis in the desert. Like it's another the best sign yet that football's almost back.
Yeah, and so it wasn't just 5. Gabe Nwosu got a shout-out as almost making the list as the punter, as a specialist on the list. So Penn State almost had 6, and probably the reason that he wasn't on there is because, Penn State already had 5 players. Do you want to go through some of these things, or do you want to go through some of the kind of the translatable things here?
Yes, go ahead. I just don't have that in front of me, buddy, but lead the way and I'll get it in front of me. Yes.
Yeah. So start with Zane Durant. It's really interesting. We actually had a conversation before the freaks list came out of, what's the difference between him and Kevin Givens? And the reason Kevin Givens is who we're talking about here is he's the standard bearer of defensive tackle pressure at Penn State, where he was a legitimate menace on the interior. And under James Franklin, that is. These things are in the James Franklin era, to be clear. He's about double the production of Zane Durant in terms of pass rushing, sacks, total pressures, pressure rate, all those things over the course of a 3-season career. Because remember, he left early, so Durant is coming back for a 4th season. And that's, to me, Zane Durant is an absolute superstar when it comes to run defense. For his size, his strength is run defense. He's athletic, he's powerful, he wins leverage battles, he's now 290, runs like a line. Literally, his testing numbers are like a linebacker. So his get off at the snap is all incredibly good. And so he is almost unblockable at times in the run game. You wouldn't think that for an undersized guy. I think a lot of people want to compare him to oh no. Greg, help me out here. Greg, are you there?
I've lost you. Sorry, but yes, go ahead.
Defensive tackle, Hall of Famer, Pitt. I just had a total brain. Aaron Donald. That was real bad.
I wasn't sure I was going to get there either. So I was reading your story while you were talking, and then I heard you needed help, and I was not exactly the lifeguard off the stand in the fastest form. But go ahead.
Everyone wants to compare Zane Durant to Aaron Donald. The real comparison to me now watching him is Ed Oliver. Still a top 10 pick, by the way, but not necessarily the difference-making pass rusher on the interior. Now, Durant has the time to change that, by the way. He can change that narrative, but that's what he needs to do this year, is take those athletic skills and translate them to pass rush, because he has, I think, 7 sacks in his career, 54 pressures. He's never been an elite pass rusher, and part of that is if his initial move doesn't win, he doesn't usually have a secondary move to then still get pressure. And I think that's going to be the thing I'm interested to see if he can do this year. I thought it was interesting they compared Saquon Barkley to Nick Singleton in the article. I'm glad that he did it so that I didn't have to do it. But if you notice, Singleton's numbers when it comes to pure strength and raw power are all better than Barkley's because the dude is a hammer.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley didn't run like that, but the number, and this is not a surprise, Saquon Barkley broke roughly 20%, a tackle on 26% of his rushes in his career.
Yeah.
Nick is at 18. Breaking more tackles, explosive touchdowns. Now, on the explosive plays, they're actually unbelievably similar. When Singleton gets into the open, he's gone, just like Barkley. It's just more the volume of explosive plays. Barkley is much higher and then has made more players miss. Now, part of that is also in the realm of situation. Barkley did not have this offensive line. It would have looked like what it looked like last year with the Eagles, Greg,
right.
if Saquon Barkley had this offensive line. So Singleton has to break fewer tackles to get the same amount of yards, but if he broke more tackles, we're talking like Ashton Genty level production. And so like superstar is where the next step is, the final step on the train for Singleton. And I think, we've talked about this a lot this year. That's something he can do. We already mentioned Tony Rojas. So Tony Rojas, the tackling, right? So that's the thing, is he runs a 4.37, 34-inch vertical, shuttle 405. Like, he's the modern prototype at linebacker. And I mean pure linebacker.
Right.
He also is the best coverage player in Penn State linebacker history since 2015. Like, no player has been better in coverage when it comes to success rate when throwing into his coverage. His career passer rating is 48. 48. That's insane for a linebacker. Normally, linebackers are the ones that get targeted in man coverage or in coverages in general, and all of his numbers stay flat across the board and even between just coverage and man coverage. He's an elite coverage defender. Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter never did that because they're edge rushers that were playing linebacker. Tony Rojas is a linebacker playing linebacker. So the problem is, in one season, he amassed the highest missed tackle rate of any player in Penn State history under James Franklin that had the minimum threshold of tackles. I think he missed 23%. Wildly high. We'll see how he does this year, and that'll determine whether or not he's a superstar. He could be. James Franklin even said, guy with star-like qualities. Then we come to the guy, Elliot Washington. We've been talking about all show because of Brett. Elliot Washington, elite speed, elite linear testing numbers, 4.32, 37.5-inch vertical jump. The thing with Washington that has been his area to develop since high school, like he's been this athletic, explosive tank at 5'11", 205 since he was in high school. It's more about his lateral movement skills. When he struggled last year, and there were times he struggled, it was changing direction on routes at the stem and having that quick burst in and out of transitions. He's a little bit of a power lifter, sort of tight muscle bound through the waist, where some of that fluid transition of speed and athleticism doesn't always show up. The good news, I think, in this system is Jim Knowles is going to have him in a position where it's going to be a lot of zone looks, even if it's man, off-man coverage, triggering on things downhill where he can just trigger downhill and explode. I think might show more of his skills and accentuate more of his abilities this year. So just not losing and having to use his recovery speed as often, because there were times last year where he got beat. And, one of the biggest plays of the year that didn't happen, Jeremiah Smith got open downfield on Elliot Washington, and Will Howard threw the ball out of bounds. So, there are certain plays that he played really well last year, a little bit obscured by situation, luck, all those things. I think he can improve in those areas. And then Khalil Dinkins, I think for him, it's just put it all together. This is a guy who was, do you remember in 2023 when he caught 100% of his passes were touchdowns? They use him as a red zone weapon.
It was darn close to that again last year, too.
Right. And so he's been used as a receiving threat in select situations as a scheme design player because he's super athletic. He didn't change. His situation changed last year where the better player overall, the senior Tyler Warren, got the receiving role, and so he got the run blocking role. That doesn't mean he's not athletic. So this year, I think I've said this before, if he's now blocking linebackers and he's running more routes, he could, there's nothing he has to change. He just go out and do it all together, and he could be the complete tight end that Penn State's had since Pat Freiermuth. So that's kind of the view of those guys and where they fit, not just from their athletic skills, but where the translation from being on the list to being one of the best. I think that's where they need to go this year for those guys to make good on the excitement they have preseason.
Got a couple of shout outs here. Stephen Light with a super chat donation. Stephen says, appreciate the work you guys do. We appreciate you, Stephen, and all of our other listeners here to this episode and every episode of BWI Live. Z-Man also weighing in with a super chat. Thank you for always being part of the BWI Live audience. And Brett back with another super chat. He's our guy. And he asks, is there a freshman, true or red shirt, that you think would have made this list, talking about Bruce Feldman's freaks list, if they had a little more exposure? Look, the one guy that's so easy to pick here, and I'm going to do it because I'm exhausted and I don't really feel like thinking, but it's Chaz Coleman, right? Like he has everything screams future freaks list participant or a guy will be included on that list in the future. It's a guaranteed no. But when you ask a question in terms of you look at those two classes and wonder who could one day be on the list, I don't think there's any real place to start other than with him.
In time, I don't think they're freaks yet. I think you could throw a dart at any of the three tight ends. Those guys are going to have freak-like qualities. The guy who is closest right now is Brian Kortovich, 6'4", 243. He's pretty explosive. He's a great athlete. He in the pantheon of what he looks like, he reminds me more in the mold of a Khalil Dinkins or a Brenton Strange, where he's more of that H-back body type, but he's still like a physically imposing guy. So I like that as kind of a soft sell for the future. I don't think they're freaks right now. I want to see Ivan Kamaju a little bit more. I don't know that he's going to be freaky in terms of his...
Right.
Yeah, just the frame and the movement skills, but I wonder if he's got the high-end testing numbers of, like, his 40 might not ever be a 4.4 or something like that. But if he's running a 4.6 at his size, where I think he could be 255, that's another guy that has freak potential in the future. And now I'm just listing all the guys that I think could be on that list. Quiet shout-out here to two freshman tackles, Malachi Goodman and Owen Alasini. I think both those guys have some freakish measurables. And tackles, offensive linemen, don't usually get on the list. But I think those, especially Alasini, former hockey player, has some really good traits that if you're talking about a freak offensive lineman, that might be somebody I'm looking at in the future.
Thank you for the question and donation, Brett. Thank you all for the yep. Well, LeVar Arrington II, obviously. Yes, no doubt. As a guy that will have a chance to be on this list in the future, for sure. All right, we got to get out of here soon, T. Frank, but we did promise it earlier, so I don't want to completely run away without doing it. But just give me one quick thought. Penn State will open practice to reporters for the second time during camp on Thursday. More to come on that during Thursday's episode of BWI Live. But just, roughly 30 hours before we're out there, something you're looking for?
Safety competition. What do the safeties look like? I still want to know. I don't care if, it's going to be different than what we expected over the summer. I want to know how the safety battle is going, and I think that's really important. So maybe the phrasing isn't who's ahead, but are you encouraged by everyone's progress so far? Right. Is everyone picking it up? That's going to be what I want to know about the safeties, outside Zaki, those young guys that are battling for the other positions.
Yeah, for me, and this is a little bit of inside baseball, but the secondary typically practices at a part of the field that is the hardest to see when they're outside. Yep. And I feel like I got a pretty good look at every position group. Penn State was kind enough to let us in for a little bit longer than normal during the practice window over the weekend. And I feel like I got a good look at every position group except the secondary. So I want to go out of my way tomorrow, T. Frank, to make sure that there is a good look at that group, and that kind of plays into exactly what you are thinking, taking a look at that safety competition, but also those corners, Elliott Washington, A.J. Harris, Davian Collins, Zion Tracy, so on and so forth. Kenny Woolsey getting a lot of shout-outs so far this offseason, so I want to see them too. So I think that'll do it, buddy. Any final thoughts?
No, this is just what happens when I don't have a chance. Like, I feel like I went on so many ADHD tangents today. So thanks for sitting with me anyway. Thanks for being here. This has been a good show, ? I think I enjoyed it. So, leave a message below if you thought it sucked, or don't. I don't want to hear that either.
You all have, we will take it. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel. This has been another edition of BWI Live. Check us out at bluewhiteillustrated.com for more on Penn State camp and getting ready for Nevada 24 days from today. We'll be back tomorrow with BWI Live on Thursday, and then practice updates here on the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course at bluewhiteillustrated.com. For T. Frank, I'm Greg Pickel. Have a good one.